Okay, so next up we have got some fantastic speakers for you in a panel session on falling back in love with advertising. Now, your moderator for this session is Jon Mew, who is the Chief Executive Officer of IAB UK. Now, Jon's bio says that he is fascinated with technology and known in the industry for his witty banter. So, no pressure, Jon. This is going to be, we're not expecting much from this session. But he will be joined by Philip Sandler, the Senior Vice President of Homeserve USA, who is a runner and a winemaker, presumably not at the same time. Also, Nic Travis, who is the Head of Digital Marketing at MBNA, who used to have Steve McLaren as his football coach. We will also, joining them on stage, is Sue Hunt, who is the Sales Director for Mail Online, who is also a George Michael superfan. And finally, Chris Binns, who is Chief Strategy Officer for MediaCom, who apparently thinks that the Stone Roses, Doolittle and Technique are the greatest albums of all time. Interesting. Wrong, but interesting. So please join me in welcoming Jon, Philip, Nic, Sue and Chris to the stage. Thank you very much.
So thank you. So yeah, that is sort of slightly... I'd like to clarify that I didn't write my own biog that says I'm known for witty banter, because I have none. So thank you all for joining us. I think we've done the intro, so we won't worry with that. I don't know whether to stand or sit. I'll start off standing and see how we get on. Before we go, I think we're going to try and have a panel session where we're going to talk about some of the problems, but we're also going to talk about some of the positives, because we're trying to fall back in love with digital, which assumes that we've fallen out of love with it, which obviously I haven't. But we'll come on to that in a minute. And we're going to start off, I think, by asking you why you started off working in this industry, why you started off working in advertising, and what it was about advertising that you loved. Because for me, when I was a young boy many years ago, I had quite simple dreams of things that I wanted to achieve. They were all very shallow and materialistic, I have to say. But ambition number one was I wanted to own a BMW. I had a Mini. I thought that was close enough. Ambition number two was incredibly shallow, which was how much money I wanted to earn by the time I was 40. And I pretty much got there, so that was all right. And ambition number three was I wanted to work in advertising, and I wanted to work for Orange. Again, I worked for FreeServe that got bought by Orange, so that was good enough as well. So I managed to achieve pretty much everything I wanted to in life, from a material point of view. But I remember, I used to love advertising, and I used to love TV ads. In fact, I once was in a quiz. It was identified TV ads, and the person running the quiz turned off the buzzer on my table because I was getting every answer right. So I was kind of addicted to ads as a kid, and I just really kind of the psychology of it, I think, really appealed to me. The fact that you can influence what people think about things through advertising, and then as my career, I started off working for ITV. And then the internet came along, and I was totally blown away by the possibilities of what you could do with technology and how that could kind of apply from a marketing point of view. So after turning down the offer of going to work for FreeServe in 1990, about 99 probably, I remember thinking this internet thing, I don't know, is it going to last? Yeah. and then I got offered a job again about 2 years later, by which point I was too late. I'd sort of already missed out on making a lot of money, but never mind. I'm not bitter about it. But I'd be interested to hear from you what it was that made you first kind of want to work in advertising. Should we start with you, Sue?
Okay. I'm going to keep the football theme because it seems to keep cropping up today. 18 years ago, Leeds United was still in the Premier League, and I was working for them in their corporate hospitality. And once I'd met the Liverpool team twice, I decided my work there was done. 2 years prior to that, a university lecturer had introduced me to a company called Yahoo, who at that time were probably the only major US provider who took the trouble to localize their content, localize their domains, their language cover, And they also happened to have a fairly small office of 50 people down in London who were hiring people with a second language. By chance, I spoke a bit of French, and off to Yahoo I went. So I'm feeling pretty full of love today, just being surrounded by all this purple.
So it's taken you back.
But to echo your point as well, John, my stock price at the time was $153, and they'd just gone through a split. So that's why we're all still working.
So, Phil, how about you? What made you first kind of move into the sphere of marketing?
So, like yourself, I too was a product of television, and so I loved seeing the ads. They were almost as entertaining to me as the content that for the shows they were supporting. So, consumed hundreds of hours of TV a week. Not a week. That doesn't make any sense. Lots of TV time. I'm already lying to a bunch of strangers. I'm so sorry about that. So there were also shows that glamorized careers in advertising, and it was already in rerun format by the time I was a kid, but there was a show called Bewitched. Anybody? Like 4 hands. Oh, it
was bigger
old.
In the US, I think. Yeah.
So the lead male character on the show was in advertising, and he spent weeks working on this pitch. He'd show up to the big meeting. All he had to do was put one sentence on a piece of cardboard, show it to the client, and everybody loved him. And I figured, I can do that. I'm going to make a career of doing that. So between being a product of TV, seeing it glamorized in TV, and in my last year of university, having one of my communications professors tell me that I could make at least $5,000 more a year if I went into the direct marketing component of advertising, I'd always be able to prove the value of what I was worth. And that was actually compelling. So I spent 15 years in the direct response agency world doing that.
Right, thank you. And Nick, what attracted you to the world of marketing?
So, I mean, I, as a kid, clearly, I kind of remember all the jingles off the telly. The Milky Bar kid and the red car and the blue car. But I suppose I kind of fell into marketing, if I'm absolutely honest with you. I did a computer science degree, and as part of that, there was a course they were running on digital marketing. But it was 15 years ago, and the lecturer literally didn't have a clue what he was on about. But he gave me enough of an interest to go and find out more about it myself. So it's kind of that university course that kind of triggered my interest in it. But I'm more kind of interested in the numbers and the science behind marketing than I am kind of like the out and out creative TV bits. I would say.
Yeah. And how about for you, Chris?
Well, I suppose I've never really seen myself as working in advertising. I work in media, which I find much more interesting than advertising, actually. And the thing that got me there was I'm of a certain age, as probably not all of you out there are. So the Face magazine was the thing I fell in love with, and its description of culture, and I suppose also Blade Runner and films like that, where you're seeing a future in which brands are interwoven into culture in a way which is either incredibly utopian or incredibly dystopian. And I just thought, actually, that looks really cool. And then I got to the end of a 4-year degree and thought, shit, I need a job. And so went to the careers library and took out the book that said media, and thought I was going to work for the Face magazine, and found out I was working in a direct response media agency.
It's close enough.
You know.
Yeah. So, as I said, we'd like to talk about some of the positive things that digital can do, but I think it's impossible not to start with some of the negative things that exist at the moment. It was interesting for me, taking on the new kind of job at the IAB. One of the first things I kind of tried to do internally was reframe what the IAB was for, and I think it's easy to forget how important digital advertising is to the world. But because when you're surrounded by all of the problems that exist in digital advertising, you forget that without it, people across the world wouldn't have free access to entertainment, to information. The transparency, the information, the entertainment that the internet's provided the world is incredible. Thankfully, I'm old enough to remember, pre-internet days, and the days where I had to walk down a high street and go into a travel agent and take their word for the fact they might dust out a book that had 2 consumer reviews in it. The world was totally different. And you know, the vast majority of that is funded through advertising. You know, most consumers can't afford to pay, you know, to get access to that content. So there is a massive net positive for consumers in digital advertising. I think there's a massive net positive for brands in digital advertising, because there's nothing like it that's ever existed before. You know, it's the smartest way to reach and wow consumers. It's, you know, you can do the most amazing things with digital. Yet, from my point of view, you know, it's easy to get dragged into spending the entire year talking about the problems that exist. But there are some problems. What do you think, from your point of view, what do you think have been the biggest issues and the biggest challenges that exist now for digital advertising? Who wants to kick off? Chris, why don't you?
I suppose the relentless pursuit of the bottom end of the funnel would be where I'd start, because you know, the reality with businesses built as brands is the value of the brand has an incremental impact on your cost per sale, response, whatever it is you're measuring. And I think what we have seen, because you can measure something, people have started measuring bottom end of the funnel because they can see it. And what that has done is, you know, much like Pavlov's dog, is taught people to expect to look at bottom end of the funnel measurement. Which is not to say you shouldn't be looking at sales outcomes, because of course you should. But I suspect that what the net impact of that is, people have got a complete lack of understanding of how to drive the top end of the funnel through digital.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, if you break that down a little bit, it's kind of the KPIs that we use as an industry today are kind of responsible for that. The last click measurement, or even the stuff that comes out of the double click platform, the last paid interaction, all of that drives some pretty questionable behaviors, because whilst the KPI is focusing on trying to get the attention before the click, it's not focusing on what drives people down the funnel. And we've got to try and help the industry move those KPIs to something much more meaningful.
Yeah, on the consumer end of what that is doing, we're abusing prospects and customers, because we are bashing them over the head continuously, when we really have to learn not to do that. Because in doing research, just to sit up here and talk about this, I said, do people really hate advertising? And they don't, in a wholesale fashion, hate advertising. They hate some of the things the industry is doing, and those are eminently fixable, and we have to do that. Everyone in this room, you know, can take part in doing that. But there's still plenty of good. I wanted to validate if people really did dislike advertising or not. So I did a search. I said, do people hate advertising? And again, found out that they just hate some of the things we're doing, but still value the fact that it fuels most of the content and functionality that they're actually consuming. One quote, and I apologize for this, it's a bit crude, but one quote that I found in was the first thing that came up in a search result, and I don't believe this, but I want to share, was, it's official, everybody hates advertising. And I immediately wanted to disagree with this, and I do. But the reason, quote, the product has never sucked harder than it does right now. It sucks the butt of the biggest ass beast in the ass beast cavern of hell. And I disagree with it. This is one ranting person, but interestingly, the rants weren't coming from consumers who said, yeah, don't invade my privacy and don't beat me over the head. Most of the rants were coming from within the industry, and I thought that was really interesting. We know it. We can fix it, so we should.
I'd add probably similar theme. I think we've forgotten the core objectives of advertising, that are to work with marketers, execute a marketer's vision, and provide a meaningful message or product to the consumer. And particularly in the space I work in, I've always worked on the technology side, and the last 7 or 8 years in programmatic. And I think the ad technology sector of the industry has almost been its own worst enemy in some cases, and created the problem to sell the solution. And I think we're seeing that start to implode. There's a lot of consolidation, rightly so. And we need to step back up from that and remember those objectives and execute towards them.
So, I mean, there are some undeniable issues that we need to address as an industry, but I think sort of on both of your points, it's interesting who are the ones that are creating those issues and the ones that are talking about them. I know at our leadership summit earlier this year, I kind of looked back at, I picked up a load of the sort of negative articles about digital from the last year and found, I don't know, 40 odd that had all been written by people that work in our industry. We're talking about the problems, and all of these people that had written these articles happened to be the people that had the solutions to the problems that they were talking about just by chance. Because I think, you know, I take viewability as an example. I really struggle with it because I see viewability as being something that's incredibly positive, that you're able to far more accurately than other media tell if someone has looked at an ad or not. I think, you know, if you compare viewability on digital, I personally think it's more accurate than other channels, and yet it's become another thing that's used as something to say digital is bad. But surely if you can use viewability to find people you know have almost certainly looked at your ad, surely that's a good thing. I'd be interested, I mean, particularly from a client and agency point of view, how, I mean, have all of these things, these negative articles that are coming up, does it change, does it make life harder for you? I mean, if you're, you know, both, obviously, from a client point of view, both clients that are very kind of forward-thinking in digital, does it make life difficult for you internally when you're trying to do more in digital? Do you have to put the extra effort in to try and defend what you're doing? Or
I think viewability was an interesting one. The first time you have to kind of disclose to your boss this dirty secret that you knew half your ads weren't being seen all along, but you couldn't really measure it. The point where you have to kind of disclose that was a little uncomfortable. But I'm with you. I think that the opportunity is there, that there's this honest conversation that can now be had around, well, where does the value sit, and how can you use viewability to drive better performance? I mean, we actually use viewability as a positive thing. I mean, we use our non-viewed impressions now to measure the incrementality of our viewed impressions, because as this audience, we created this holdout cell. There's no need for us to do charity ads. Not that I don't like giving money to charity, but for me, I think it's an incredibly positive thing. If you were to look at the TV industry, right, I mean, the TV adverts are being fast-forwarded through and faster, more than ever before, and there is zero research done on it, or if there is, it ain't being shared with any of the advertisers.
What about for you, Phil? I mean, how has the kind of the sentiment towards digital, has that made your life harder in the last year? Or?
Well, in our world, it's used very much, up until recently with our work with Quantcast, it was viewed very much as a direct response only medium.
Right.
How does it compare to the other channels within which we're very successful, primarily direct mail?
Yeah.
So it has an unfair standard because they're different channels and we have a different platform to communicate what our company does for a living. But as a direct marketing medium, it's difficult because everything is expected to generate results on day one, and it doesn't. Often there's a test and learn process with everything. There's this assumption that since it's available 24/7, you can change and optimize 24/7, and it takes a little more time and consideration. So there's a burden to react 24/7, so that's very challenging. And there's not a belief yet, but we're chipping away at it, that digital can be used as an effective branding medium, and we're making strides now in doing that. What we want to show is that, just based on a lengthy conversation we had about it this morning, we want to show how that drives incrementality in our marketing spend to show where that is making a difference in new people in the consideration process, and people closer to the bottom of the funnel, and where that's driving more revenue.
Right. And Chris, I mean, you obviously speak to lots of brands. How have you seen, how have those conversations about digital changed over the last year? I mean, is there a significant perception problem, do you think?
I think, and I should probably be careful with my view here, but the reality is that viewability and all of those issues should be secondary to outcome.
Yeah.
So we observe human behaviour and act on that behaviour in order to drive commercial gain for clients. That's what advertising and media is.
Yeah.
And if you observe something, you act on it, and that has a positive outcome, if under one in every 100 times you do that, there's a viewability issue, then that's an opportunity for incrementality, right? That should be the conversation rather than what it's become, which is we're just going to batter people over and over and over and over and over again. And for me, that, I'm in advertising, and there are probably people from my organisation in here who disagree with this, but I'm in advertising to try and grow clients' businesses, and that's the thing you focus on, the outcome. And the reality is that if we're honest about digital advertising, certain elements of it have a scale threshold, for example. Right? If you're not spending enough, you're just not going to get any kind of impact in outcome terms. We've seen that, especially in the application of data, which we should come on to at some point. And that's the thing to focus on. Instead of going after viewability is an opportunity to create incremental gain for the outcome.
And it'd be interesting to think about, or to talk about kind of the objectives, which we touched on briefly, but the objectives that typically we use as an industry to measure the success of digital. Because, is that one of the, do you think that's the big problem, that we're just measuring the wrong thing, or?
I think it's the importance of the individual metrics, because viewability is important in the mix, and it's entirely incorrect and wrong that there are still warehouses full of bot farms sitting around the world, and you don't want your brand appearing on our favourite example, kensquizzes.com. But particularly as a media owner, and from the media owner perspective, it becomes very difficult to work with brands and reach those outcomes if things like viewability are also used as a pricing mechanism.
Right.
It's working to an objective and working in partnership to those objectives rather than using them for different means.
And how do you guys, from a client point of view, we were talking a little bit before about how well you think you can track attribution and effectiveness, and how well do you think you do, and how well do you think everyone else does?
It's a difficult one, right? So, if you take the view that every attribution model is a best guess, kind of how do you validate the attribution model? If anyone thinks that just going and buying an attribution model off the shelf is going to resolve all your problems, that isn't true. We can dispel that myth right now. You've got to have some way of validating that model's right, because that model is kind of a series of best guesses, mathematical equations, but how do you calibrate that attribution model, and what KPIs can you kind of create as a business? That's why we've invested heavily in kind of incrementality, and we're still at the start of this journey, but understanding what the incrementality is, using DM skill sets of creating sizable holdout cells in your advertising campaigns enables you to kind of understand the true value of those campaigns. And once you've got the true value of the campaigns, you know which number you're trying to calibrate the attribution model back to. I think that's where we've got to start to try and push our KPIs towards. And it's complicated. No one's going to sit here and tell you otherwise. But we genuinely kind of need to revisit all of our KPIs and make sure that they actually do drive value for our business and they don't just annoy our customers.
How far away do you think you are from where you want to be?
I'd say we're pretty close, but there's always new channels and there's new issues. The walled gardens that the social networks put up doesn't help anyone. Trying to get data out of Facebook about what's going on with your advertising and crash that into your attribution model is not an easy one to fix. We're kind of there, but every time we're there, Facebook pull the rug out and we have to go and start again.
So I'll be slightly contrarian in that I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect attribution model. I haven't seen one yet that I think is more than 50% good.
Right.
And early, when the term attribution started getting thrown around in everyone's sales pitch, everyone was promising, we'll tell you what the last 10 actions were, and we're going to be able to focus on how that took place and what really brought your customers in. And I've seen dozens and dozens of them, and none of them have ever come close to really saying, here's the perfect media model that should come out of that. And until we get the keys into the walled garden, and until there are unbiased third-party standards and transparency to measuring the other 80% of the paid advertising spend that's sitting behind a fairly large search provider and a fairly large social media platform, I'll leave names out of it, but you're never going to have it. So directionally, great. you can do more testing and create more hypotheses based upon what the attribution models tell you, but it's never going to be perfect, and it's only going to get close when the walled garden comes down.
So, Chris, what do you think? I mean, of the clients that you talk to, I mean, how much of the world do you think still hinges on click-through rates and how many ads are clicked on?
I don't think I've had a conversation about click-through rates with anyone for about 3 years. I could be wrong about that, but the way we like to think about things is they operate as a system, a whole, and the more you take your equations from earlier and unpick the individual elements of a system, it's like to get. I play a bit of hockey, and if you take a squad of 16 hockey players, go to a game, they win the game 7-2. Centre forward scores 7 goals. Doesn't mean the centre forward is the best player on the pitch.
Yeah.
It just means that you've achieved your outcome, which is to win, right?
Yeah.
And you can probably look at various bits and pieces and go, I can tweak that a bit, I can tweak that a bit, I can tweak that a bit, which I think is what you were talking about with your equations, right? But you've got to view the whole. And part of the flaw has been to start to unpick individual items and not to see the whole. Yeah. And so, the desired whole for pretty much every advertiser in the world, apart from the public service stuff, is to sell more stuff. And to sell more stuff probably arguably on the back of a stronger brand. And I think what we've focused on is whether someone happens to have clicked on something.
Yeah, we're trying to get 7 strikers all the time,
Yeah.
which doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win anything.
No, it doesn't mean you're going to win a thing, 7 strikers. Football management advice for any of you out there.
So, some of the problems, about some of the solutions, what do we need to do as an industry to start to change we talked a bit about it, but to change perceptions of digital for the better? What are some of the things you think we need to do?
A few things. I'll go back to providing transparency, and having the industry work on a set of standards we can all agree to. Some things like viewability, even, for example. I only learned this very recently. I was surprised to find that viewability, especially in the video space, meant I'm seeing a video for 1 or maybe 2 seconds, and I think that's nuts. I can't learn anything in 1 or 2 seconds from a video, and I'm surprised that is the standard with which video viewability is being measured. So things like that, I think, have to be reevaluated.
Can we pick that apart a second, if that's all right? I'd be interested to hear more on both those things.
No offense to the IAB, I know it's an IAB.
No. So first one was transparency. You said more transparency. Of what and from whom, do you think?
Largely from media, from Google and Facebook and the folks that really control a lot of the behavior that is happening before people come into our front door.
What is it you'd like them to share?
Sharing user behavior beyond just what my campaign is doing that I could see in AdWords and my own analytics, but sharing that data into an attribution model so I can see how search is really playing a role in the whole ecosystem, how social is playing a feeder role into our business beyond but what I can tell with the analytics they provide for just my narrow sliver of that pie.
Okay, and then onto the kind of the industry standards bit, which is obviously something I'm kind of very involved with. Mm-hmm. So viewability is interesting. So I think for us, for the IAB, one of the challenges around viewability is we need to reframe the conversation, because the piece that I think fell out somewhere is that viewability should be an opportunity to see an ad, and I think what unfortunately has happened is it's become used as a benchmark of was an ad effective or not, and I think is what we're often bashed over the head with is how on earth can half an ad for a second or 2 seconds of video, how can that be effective, and it shouldn't. That's not. No one's saying it should be. I mean, that's definitely not a measure of effectiveness, and that is supposed to be an industry minimum standard for an opportunity to see. And actually, if brands want to operate to a higher standard, then they totally can. Unilever do as the biggest example. But it's interesting your take on it, because I think how it's become translated as an industry and how it gets used is perhaps different from what it should be, which I think is you know,
I
where
look
we
at it
fall
with
down.
with an advertiser's lens on, and
Yeah.
I say, did my prospective consumer have a chance to consume my creative? And they don't in a second or two. So, you know, I'd like to look at things like that and say, did it give the consumer? It's very industry focused. It should be consumer focused, and we should say, did it give the consumer the proper stage to see the creative, understand it, and view it in its intended format? And then maybe that will start changing the way we present ads, so that or advertise, so that it's more relevant, easier to consume, and surrounded by the appropriate content.
Right. Who else would like to answer that? Sue, you're smiling. I'm going to take that as a yes. What else do we need to do to start to change that perception and make digital even better?
I think piggyback Philip's point of the two big players in the space, and we now have a third retail giant joining the fray. And I think we're all spending too long combating each other and competing with each other against the crumbs that are left behind. And I think there's a huge need for more collaboration, less rhetoric and self-promotion in the trade press, as we've already talked about, and really fighting to grow the slice of the pie. The pie overall is growing, but our piece within it is increasingly threatened and harder to protect.
Yeah. And what about the overall perception of digital as well? What are the things? What are the other things you think we need to do? I'll look at either of you to help answer that.
I think we need to focus on the customer again, don't we? It's kind of we've known for a while the kind of retargeting and the heavy retargeting that we do and the reliance we have. It drives our metrics, right? But customers don't like it. So I think the industry just kind of needs to get back to thinking what's best for the customer, what sort of advertising do they like, how do we bring them down this funnel, which pieces are creative, and it's different for every product and every business. Are going to have different ways of doing this, and I think we kind of need to stop thinking that there's this one perfect funnel and one perfect measurement model. Everyone's got a different one, and we need to kind of get back to understanding what our customers want.
And it's hard, isn't it? I think we sort of touched on it earlier, but it's easy to not worry about the problems that you're creating. I think if you're doing retargeting, you might be pissing off the consumer, but does that really matter to you as a brand? I mean, it should, but does it? You know, it's easy because the metrics you use.
I mean, we started doing incrementality testing, and we found out that retargeting takes up a load of our last click sales, but there's hardly any incrementality in it. So why are we doing it? What's wrong with the retargeting that we can do? Because in theory, I'm fine with retargeting. Retargeting should absolutely work, but kind of to who and to when, where, for how long, how much. Once you start getting some data around incrementality, you can start making much more informed decisions about who you go after and how long for and what sort of impression frequency you want to put on them.
And I take it you do retargeting?
We do, yeah.
And how do you stop that happening? What do you do?
We've changed the KPI, so we measure everything through kind of incrementality, and by having that focus, it's changed the way we buy media. Right.
Okay. And Chris, what else do you think we need to do?
I mean, for those of you who are again old enough to remember Blade Runner, the robots are unpicked by something called the Voight-Kampff test, which is an empathy test, and I suspect that there's been far too much focus on bits and bytes and not enough focus on empathy. And actually, you know, hopefully some of the stuff these guys are building, if I were to do a little advert for them for a second, will help with that a little bit. But actually, you know, when you listen to VCs talk about what they're looking at with AI at the moment, they talk predominantly about human-assisted AI. They're not really investing in robotic AI, because actually humanity still has something to do. And I think there's a massive assumption that you put £1 million into the sausage machine, you press go, and on the basis of the data that you have, the sausage machine hits the same person over the head 1 million times. And somewhere between that and just walking up to them in the street and asking them how they are and handing them 10 quid to try your product is something quite interesting. And I think that's about human understanding. And some of that can come from what you can see in digital data, but some of it will come from asking the very simple question of why. You know, why are you doing that thing? What is it that it leads you to, and all that? And I think that's the thing. It's easy to forget, and that's the thing. If you look at the great, if we're to fall back in love with advertising, let's take it to that, or with media, or with products. I mean, you know, people love Uber, right? You look at the great products and advertising that exist and have been developed over the last 20, 30 years. They have a really deep understanding of people at their heart, and I think that the vast majority of revenue that's flowed in a certain direction hasn't had that at its heart. It's had the fact that I can measure something at its heart.
Yeah, I saw a good tweet the other day of someone, I can't remember the exact words, but it's something like, you know, Uber didn't kill the taxi business, Airbnb didn't kill the hotel business, other examples on there, but it was bad customer service that did. And actually, it's, you know, they focus on the customer, not necessarily their own staff that well, but the customer. So we talked a bit about them, what we do. We talked about some of the problems. It'd be great to hear some of the things that you think have worked really well. Digital advertising obviously works. It's the most money spent on it compared to other mediums. It'd be great to hear from you any examples you've got of things that have gone well or things that have gone badly that you've learnt from. You know, any examples of things that been good?
Over-targeting, right? So just because you can find 50,000 celiacs does not mean you should be targeting 50,000 celiacs. It doesn't tend to work particularly well. And I think that's one of the really important parts of this whole data-driven thing, right? It's when you look at the outcome you get from that, it doesn't stack up versus the cost of getting that bit of data, the human capital for actually finding it and acting on it, the technology you need to do it, the increased media yield someone will try and get you for because actually they don't want to decrease their cost per thousand. You add all of that up and then you go, I've got 50,000 celiacs, and it just doesn't add up. And I think there's a massive issue with over-targeting that we could all learn from enormously, actually.
I'd echo Chris's point on that. So we're a credit card business, right? So probably 50% of the UK instantly isn't eligible for one of our credit cards, and the wealth of data that we're able to go out and buy from the market, we've tried to do all sorts of things to target the people that are eligible for cards, and we tend to find that trying to get too granular with your targeting actually kind of doesn't deliver the efficiency that's needed. We've found, instead of kind of creating really tight audiences of people that we want to go after, we're better off finding the people that we don't want to target and just excluding them from the advertising in the first place, and letting the algorithms and stuff figure out from what's left who are the best people to go after. That's certainly been our experience thus far with the programmatic and the data that's available out there today.
Right. What about from your point of view? Is there anything you think that's working particularly well for you at the moment from a digital point of view?
Yeah, and I'm seeing more of it, which is positive. So when advertisers that don't have the contextually relevant place for their consumers to hang out or don't know quite where to target it, and they're creating their own contextually relevant environments. So as a runner, Under Armour, who has met my run, has created this great contextual environment to be forward-facing and value-added, but at the same time, they're selling, their brand is always behind it. They're giving me appropriate offers as I log in and track runs and do things like that. Pandora did something very similar with Propel Water, where you were able to create your own branded custom station on Pandora, and of course, Propel sponsored that content in an environment where it was going to be completely relevant and focused to that particular passion someone had. So this creation of the right advertising in the right contextual environment is great, and I think the proper use or the responsible use of data is going to allow more of that. The increasingly exploding use of mobile and other forms of data like GPS location and driving behavior is going to get scary, but hopefully really interesting and used properly over time. So I'm excited for the future creation of the contextually relevant environment using information but not abusing information.
Yeah. And Sue, what about for you then, from a male point of view? If you any clients you think that you're seeing do really good stuff, or things you see that are working particularly well?
Yeah, I think in recent years we've enjoyed an amazing amount of automation. Every industry for decades should benefit from automation. And I love that we're now seeing brand campaigns as well as performance and direct response that can be automated through all the plumbing that we've all invested in over the years. And what I'm really benefiting from now is we're back to the point where humans are working with humans on the creative aspects, on performance, on partnerships, to really take advantage of that automation to do things more creatively, with ultimately, you hope, a better outcome for the consumers as well as the brands.
And do you think from a creative point of view, perhaps there's a gap creatively of how good it could be and how good it is. Do you think there are brands that are nailing it from a creative point of view? Do you think on average there's still a lot to do?
I think there could be more engagement with right at the beginning of the journey with the creative teams and organisations and concepts.
Nick, sorry, you.
Yeah. Sorry, I think all this the technology that's kind of out there is almost distracting marketeers away, and we're almost focusing too much on the data science and forgetting that at its heart, marketing is a creative-led industry. Whilst I professed at the beginning that I'm not a huge fan, didn't get into the industry to be creative. It's fundamental to kind of building that relationship with the customer. Yeah. If we want to get away from this targeting the bottom of the funnel, we're going to have to be creative again. And I think that's kind of, it's missing a little bit from certain segments of the industry.
Yeah, and it is, we don't really have a creative agency on the stage. And what I've noticed most about working at the IAB is when you talk to people about the problems, basically the person that gets blamed is the person that's not there at the time. So let's not entirely blame creative agencies, but how's the relationship work for you with, media agencies, creative agencies? What do you see problems?
To a certain extent, the complexity of the environment that we operate in today, so the amount of channels and the sheer volume of creative that we have to build and the different formats we have to build it in to bring a campaign to market, kind of makes it difficult. We're so focused on doing all those things that need to be done to get a campaign out the door that sometimes it kind of distracts away from how good the creative idea was in the first place.
But that whole industry is seeing a huge shift right now, where big corporations and consulting firms are bringing that capability in-house because it's so hard to keep the external agencies apprised of what is changing on a second-by-second basis with the data, with their information, with the creative. So we're seeing a huge shift of big enterprises bringing the agencies in-house and foregoing agency relationships, which is good and bad. I think once you bring it in-house, it loses a little bit of its free-spirited and creative thinking, but you do certainly have more control over the end product and intimacy with the data, the results, and the ability to optimize that fairly quickly.
So before we run out of time, just a couple of last things. What are you most excited about from a digital point of view coming up on the horizon? Digital advertising, anything? You're looking at me a bit blankly. Something
excited
hopefully.
about? The thing that I worry about the most, and in some ways therefore excites me because I like hard problems, is the balance between what's happening with programmatic consumption driven by people like Amazon and algorithmic discovery. And I'm old enough to have grown up where I had some serendipity. I bumped into some things. And I wonder I've got a 25-year-old nephew. I sort of wonder how increasingly he makes brand choices moving forward in a world where everything is either served to him on the back of what Amazon know or what Spotify think your music tastes are.
Right.
And how brands dissect that and dismantle it and get themselves into that environment is a really interesting question, especially when you lay a voice over the top.
Yeah. Anything else? What else are we excited about?
So I remain excited to see kind of to see programmatic live up to its potential. So if we go back, wind the clock back, programmatic promised us the ability to find our customers and to target them specifically with messaging and creative that mattered. Really, thus far, programmatic has automated the buy-in purchase and made kind of the agency's lives a little easier and kind of taken some of the grunt work out. But I don't think we've got down to that kind of personalised targeting. And I also kind of then look forward to how that programmatic targeting capability starts to roll into the TV space, and certainly with the emergence of Netflix and Amazon Prime, how those guys eventually start to roll that TV advertising model into the over-the-top.
Yeah.
This is more of a personal thing than an industry thing, but I'm really curious to see how the marketer gets into the smart and AI-enabled home, which I think is really scary, because my watch, my Alexa, my Echo, my Google Home, they're all listening to everything I say. Fortunately, I'm not talking about anything naughty, but I'm not planning anything bad, I promise. But it's going to be really interesting now that you are literally being listened to and watched 24/7. It's going to be interesting to see how the industry doesn't abuse that, but really creates relevant offerings based on what you're doing 24/7 every day in your own home. So scary, but very interesting, and I'm curious to see how it plays out, because it's already happening. I already, before I leave, I say, Alexa, have my Starbucks ready on High Ridge Road at 8:30, and it'll be there. That's nuts. That's like the Jetsons stuff that we thought was crazy, 20, 30 years ago.
Do you actually do that? No?
Yeah.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Like it. Yeah. But see, I'm still get quite excited about going to Starbucks and lying about my name, giving them a silly name they then have to call out. But Sue, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, I'd take Nick's point there, and I think programmatic does have massive opportunity to fulfil potential with the convergence and the wider digital world as we look at out of home. I think pushing to 70-80% digital now in the UK. The nature of TV advertising has completely changed, and with everything mobile in the middle, there's huge opportunity there for the media owners, for the brands, and it's a slice of the world that those 2 or 3 players don't really have a handle on at the moment.
Do you think that will change?
Of course it will change, but as long as it doesn't.
Fantastic. Well, and I'm going to end on a question that's kind of pointless, but I'd just be interested your take on it. Do you think all advertising will be 100% digital in the very near future? Thoughts?
No.
No.
I still like the printed page for things. I still like seeing, feeling, touching the live product. Word of mouth, I will still take someone's point of view that I trust and respect over what any advertiser is telling me. I think that will never go away. TV, I think people are still highly, highly influenced by television, especially in the States. And if you see it, it's real and it's legitimate, and we're not in a big way, and I think we need to be as a company personally. So I don't think TV is going anywhere, and I think if it's supporting great content that's out there, people are going to be willing to live with it. I just think we should do it properly and continue, for example, entertaining people with the advertising itself. The insurance industry, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you'd think, oh, insurance, what a horribly dull, boring subject. But every major insurer in the States, Geico, State Farm, Nationwide, Progressive, Allstate, they've all taken these episodic, themed approaches to entertaining you for you to say, oh, what's the next one going to be? What's the next one going to be? And I found a lot of positivity in that when I was preparing for this, where people looked forward to that. They wanted to post the latest one on YouTube.
Geico, a great example of a brand that approaches digital really well. I was almost disappointed, but I didn't know who they were because they were a US, so I was disappointed when I found out they were an insurance company. So based on their digital ads, I thought it was going to be something absolutely amazing, but it's insurance. But it just goes to show, I think, doesn't it? Any final last thoughts? Can we fall back in love with digital, or are you actually already in love with it?
I don't think we ever fell out of love with it,
Good.
do we?
Yeah.
Chris?
The whole premise for this was off. We love it.
Look, I think the thing to fall back in love with is humanity. Observing people, watching their behaviour, acting on it. That's what advertising should be doing. Whether that happens to be digital or non-digital is sort of, increasingly given the direction of distribution, will go one way, right? But, actually, what happens when someone's talking to something? What happens when people start talking rather than texting, which is a move from text search to voice search, etc. So humanity is the thing we should be in love with, not advertising or media.
I think that's a nice place to end. So why don't we end it there? First of all, just say a massive thank you to all of our panellists. So let's put our hands together and thank them. I think I'm going to hand back over to Hannah now, but I just want one last thing from me, since I've got the mic and the stage, if I may. I think the one thing that really struck me throughout that really was about how we need to work together. So I guess that's the one thing I'd ask you all to do, is try and work with us and work together to help the whole industry to fall back in love with digital. Thank you.